Chairman, thank you. Thanks for holding this hearing as well. It's incredibly important. Let me just set context for this to be able to walk through. We have 51 federal agencies that distribute grants, 131,000 recipient organizations, 1,900 grant programs in the federal government, and in fiscal year 22, the federal government spent over $1 trillion in taxpayer dollars in grants. So this is an incredibly large, incredibly complicated issue, and as Mr. Hansen just mentioned before, if you're a small town and you know that big towns get grants for water systems and for roads and whatever it may be, they think I have no idea where to even go to get it. And so I do appreciate us having the hearing and be able to walk through this and where the issues are. Mr. Arkin, let me start with 2019. Let's go back to ancient history, pre-COVID, if we have memory of that time period, of a bill called the GREAT Act that passed. I carried that through the Senate. Virginia Fox carried that through the House. It was supposed to synchronize some of the data systems. How's OMB doing at this point in actually implementing the GREAT Act? What's the status of a bill that was done 4 years ago?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And we actually have work underway looking at the GREAT Act, and we're looking at just that question. What is the status of OMB and also HHS as the largest grant-making agency to implement the program? How does that align with the law and what the requirements are? And also, how are both OMB and HHS engaging stakeholders, engaging other agencies, local communities, states, as they develop the standards?
So what are you seeing so far? Obviously, this was passed 4 years ago. What are you seeing as far as implementation and creating the standards?
Right, and so the final deadline for when all this is supposed to be in place is at the end of 2023, this fiscal year, and so it's getting close. We continue to have conversations with OMB about the steps that they've taken. There are an initial set of, I believe, over 500 different data standards that they've developed. We're going to be looking at those. We're going to be seeing how those align with the intent of the GREAT Act, and also talking with others about their reaction to those standards that have been developed.
Okay, we'll look forward. Thanks for the oversight on that. We'll look forward to walking through that to make that clearer. There's been a lot of conversation about faith-based entities as well, if they're equal partners with every other entity. What are you seeing as far as oversight right now on faith-based entities requesting an application for a grant, not to increase their faith, but for social services, other things that are actually happening out there? This seems to have had a rise and fall over the last several years of whether faith-based entities are full participants with everyone else in this. Are you seeing anything rise on this? Because the Biden administration has noted they're going to re-look at this issue again.
It's not something that we have looked at in our work. Certainly something that we'd be happy to talk to you or your staff about to get more, to understand your interests a little bit better and see if there's ways that we can support in looking into that.
Be great. Thank you. Let me bounce a couple things on you just on grants.gov. Sure. Mr. Hansen had mentioned before the complexity of actually reading through the language. Sometimes it's 70 pages of government legalese to be able to go through, and the difficulty of finding if you're even eligible for this. Obviously, that's something that can be done, can be standardized. Every single agency can have just simple plain text language at the beginning of it saying, here's who's eligible and here's who's not eligible, here's when it's available and here's when it closes. They're trying to get some of those elements in there, but it's certainly not clear at this point, to be able to say the least. And there's still some issues. While grants.gov is a very helpful site and the search features all work well, anyone who spends a little bit of time playing with grants.gov and just typing in different search words will find some gaps in the system. I would encourage anyone to be able to go in. For instance, I was playing with different words on it this morning and typed in the word watermelon. As a watermelon fan, I want to see if there's watermelon grants out there. What pops up when you type in watermelon into the search in grants.gov is a grant opportunity for the U.S.-Egypt education program to help Egyptian children increase their math skills. How that's connected to watermelon, I couldn't discover on it, but we still have issues with the system and the way that's actually broken out. So I'd encourage just in the oversight on this to continue to be able to work towards getting consistent language, common sense language, the way that's actually to be able to be listed in there that makes sense to people. And if anyone can find the word watermelon in the Egypt grant for children learning math in Egypt, that would be helpful. And the second question will be, why are we giving a grant to help Egyptian children learn math? We have a few math problems here as well. Second thing on this is just the fragmentation that continues to be able to come up. This is an issue that we worked through just in Oklahoma in a grant opportunity. I need to make sure I get the language right. We had a challenge in actually listing out for a grant that they couldn't find us in the process because we appeared in the system as State Department of Education rather than the Education, Oklahoma Department of. So our folks spent days trying to be able to unwind that one thing to be able to get in the system. That's an area that we appreciate any kind of insight. Mr. Arkin, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, in general, that's been a big challenge, consistent language that gets used in the grant landscape. That's something that we've found in our work before with things talking about, the type of award. And it affects both upfront in terms of recipients looking for funding. It affects the transparency aspect as well in terms of getting a handle on where did the money go, what type of program, what location. When you have inconsistent terms, that gets much harder to do. And so we've made recommendations to OMB to improve guidance to agencies so they can help. And we continue to monitor the status of that in OMB's efforts to implement those recommendations.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. That'd be helpful. Sure. The one last question is one not that you can really offer, but it's one that I'll lay before this committee as an issue that we need to have ongoing oversight, and it's the question of what grants do we fund? We have $31 trillion in total debt. I think everyone on this dais is very, very aware of that. The challenge is we're still having problems in the grant funding going out. As we go just start pulling the thread on grant funding that's out there, we recently found a grant for a study for medieval Renaissance studies that is going to be conducting a conference in San Antonio. And the conference, and it's a federal grant, to recreate the works of Shakespeare in a new cultural praxis in decolonizing the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. That's a federal grant. And if we haven't had enough Shakespeare on that, we have a different grant that is actually out there that's a federal grant to create a virtual reality for Shakespeare so that you could put on the VR glasses and then you would think that you're in a Shakespearean theater interacting with other individuals. Now, again, Meta is doing this on a large scale. While we have a federal grant to be able to create this system, I don't know. We have another grant that's out there that has given to do a study of the cultural meaning of sound in colonial Mexico. I could go on with just a quick pull of the thread on some of the grant issues. We do have a larger issue on grants, and with $1 trillion in grant spending, we need to determine what is a water system in a community that desperately needs help for a water system, and what is a grant that's going to do a study of sound in colonial Mexico, and how do we figure out how to be able to prioritize those two. So that's a larger conversation we need to have in the days ahead. Thank you.